My name is Nathaniel Dodson, and in today's Illustrator tutorial, we're going to take a look at creating this pretty cool little mountain-looking effect. I saw an image, or somebody sent me an image of an artist. I can't even pronounce their name, but it's from Guilin, China, and it was really, really cool. It was all this sort of monochromatic, everything based on these reds and pinks. Thought it was really neat, so I created a couple sketches that are heavily influenced here by this person's illustration. I'll make sure I link them in the bio of the video. You can download whichever one of these sketches we end up doing here in the tutorial. I'm going to make sure that I have it available as a download on the website, but we're going to take that sketch, we're going to create a vector scene in Adobe Illustrator, we're going to have an absolute blast, and it all gets started right now. Now, here in Adobe Illustrator, let's get started by creating a new file, file new, of course, and I'm going to create an 800 by 600 pixel file. We can name it whatever we want. I'm just going to say pink or sunset or something like that. 800 by 600. The important thing here is just we want to work in RGB color, and we'll be good if we're doing that. So let's create this. Got my little reference file open there to help me out along the way. I'm also going to move off screen for a second and just change the size of my layers by entering my layer panel options. This will hopefully just make it a little easier for you guys to see what I'm doing. Let's make these about 35 pixels, just a little bit bigger. Now I want to drag in the sketch, so I'm going to jump out to my Finder. Here's the original sketch that I did, and it's cool, but it's a little bit too sort of up in the air, a little bit too much of an aerial shot for my liking. I want something a little closer to the ground. I basically just found a bunch of photos of Vietnam and sort of sketched together some of the mountains and waterways as I saw. I got one of these cool Vietnamese fishermen. They got those net like cages they throw into the water, and he's doing his thing there on his little boat. That's cool. But this sketch that's closer to the perspective of the illustration that I saw that inspired this whole tutorial, this is going to be the one that we're going to use today. So you can download this, by the way. I'll have links for this and for the entire color palette that we're using today that you can load into Adobe Illustrator. There are going to be links right down there in the bio of this video. So drag this into Adobe Illustrator. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to hold down Shift and just make it a bit smaller and move it over and zoom in here on my artboard. And maybe I'll make it even a little bit smaller. Basically just try to fit it onto the artboard as best you can. It doesn't even really matter if it's exactly the same proportion. If it shifts a little bit, hey, you know what? Happy accidents can be a good thing. And I'm going to double click on this layer, and I'm going to call it Sketch, as if we didn't know that. And I'm going to create an entirely new layer here. I'm going to drag Sketch up above this. This new layer we're going to call Artwork, and of course it's where we're going to put our artwork. But what I want to do is I want to select the Sketch layer, hit that little circle out there, and up here in the Properties panel, I'm going to go into the Opacity part of the Appearance section and just set this layer to the Multiply Blend mode. It doesn't look like it did anything, but what it's doing is essentially pretending like all the white stuff is not there. So when we start drawing our shapes onto the Artwork layer beneath the sketch, we'll still see the sketch lines overlaid above our artwork. All right, now we can lock up the sketch layer and get ready to create some artwork. Let's really quickly open a few panels that we're going to be using here. We're going to use the color panel a bit. I'm going to drag it out over here so we can just see it a little easier. We are also going to use the Swatches panel. So I'll drag that out and throw it over here as well. We're also going to be using the Gradient panel a bit. And I know that some of this stuff is in the is up in the Properties panel and stuff, but I still kind of prefer working with sort of the older panels than just doing everything through the new Properties panel. All right, so now that we have that, we're going to first load in our swatches. So you probably have some default swatches like this. Let me make my swatches a little bit smaller so everybody can see them here. You probably have some sort of default swatches like this, and we want to go Open Swatch Library and just choose Other Library, and you're going to want to grab the .ase file that you downloaded, wherever you saved it on your hard drive, your desktop, wherever. Grab that. That's the file we want to load into Illustrator, and you can see here it is tutvid Moody Sunset Palette, and all you have to do is click on the little folder there, and it's going to bloop, move them all over to your swatches panel. Great. We have all the colors we need. In fact, I may go to like a medium thumbnail just so it's a little bit bigger. All right, something like that. And I'll collapse my panel. Now that we finally, I think, have all the housekeeping out of the way, let's begin creating some artwork here. We're going to start with the rectangle tool, just the regular rectangle. And I do believe I have snapping turned on, snap to point at least. Basically, I just want to create a rectangle that's the size of my document. And there we have it. It's a white rectangle with a black stroke. We can select the black stroke and just hit the little none icon to get rid of that. And then for the fill, we want to give it a gradient fill. And look at this. See how, despite the fact that the artwork is beneath our sketch, we're still seeing the sketch lines on top of it. That's the power of that multiply blend mode I mentioned a moment ago. We're going to make this a radial gradient right there. Hit radial gradient. And I'm going to find my colors. And we're going to use our yellow and our pink, our first two colors here. So I'm going to drag this down to the first spot. Or actually, you know what we can do? We can just select that first handle, grab the color picker, and bloop, grab the yellow, and then select the second handle and grab the pink, just like that. And this is going to be the color in our sky. So I'm going to move this, maybe move it up a little bit. Maybe I'll stretch it up a little too, and maybe out a little here in the gradient editor. Maybe it's a little bit too high in the sky. I do want to see some of that pink up there. Something like that is cool, and I think that'll work for our base sky. Now that we have the base sky, let's create the sun, which I've just sort of thrown in there with some odd shaped rings. We're going to use the ellipse tool, of course. Hold down Shift, drag out an ellipse. I want it to be a little smaller. I sort of had second thoughts about the size of the sun. I'm going to go a little smaller, and maybe I'll make the sun about that big. And I'm going to use my third color. That's that very light, very light beige yellowy color. That's the color of the sun. And we're going to jump over to our properties panel. And here for opacity, I'm going to set the opacity of my sun to 80% because we're going to create a series of concentric circles, rings emanating from this. And each ring is going to drop by 15% in the opacity department. And that's going to get us down to a ring that has just 5% opacity. So it's pretty simple. We go Object, Path, Offset Path. And we say, hey, look, give me a 20 pixel offset path. See, it creates the ring. Hit OK. Illustrator will automatically select the ring. So what do? We come in here and just subtract 15% from the opacity, knock it down to 65%. And we just repeat that process. Object path, offset path, you got it, 20 pixels. And we're going to knock this bad boy down to 50. There we go. And of course, repeat. Object path, offset path, 20 pixels. There we have it. And we're going to knock this down to 35. And we're going to do it 2 more times, I believe. Path, offset path, really 20. And knock this thing down to 20% opacity. And then, of course, the last one, like I said, it's going to end up being a 5% opacity ring, barely there, just fading us out to nothing. And if I collapse the properties panel and I shut off the sketch, you can see this is what we just created. This really cool, just vectory sun. In fact, I'm going to drag a selection over this. Now, I have selected the background, so I'm going to hold down Shift and just click the background color to deselect it. You can see I have all these ellipses here in my layers panel. These are all making up that sun. We'll go Object and just choose to group them together, just to keep it all together. We can even name it Sun in our Layers panel because we are going to have some layers stacking up here pretty quickly. Now, in addition, we may want to create a couple sort of, so I've got these sort of curves in the sky that are meant to be sort of either clouds or reflections of the sunlight or just something like that. We'll do something fun. Let's use the curvature pen tool here and just I'll click once here, I'll click once up here, I'll click once here, and then once sort of over here, and just loop all the way out and around the document. Way around it, just like that. And we're going to fill this with just a white to nothing gradient. So let's select this little black to white gradient here in our swatches panel. And down in the gradient editor or the gradient panel here, we're going to make our black color stop here. I'm going to make it solid white. And I'm going to set the opacity of that to 0. Now I'm going to change the angle of this gradient to 90 degrees. And I actually want the white at the top, so we can just hit this little nifty reverse gradient button. There we go. And we just want to really limit the white in this. So we really just want it to be this little tiny thing up there that's just kind of hanging out, doing its thing up at the top. And we're going to select that white color stop. So I've got the white color stop selected now. And I'm going to reduce the opacity of this to like, let's go 20%. Something very, very subtle. So if I shut off the sketch, you can see I just have this nice little flowing thing up there. All right, let's turn on the sketch. We're going to do a second one of these lines using curvature pen as well. So now I'll start here and I'll just like bump it up into here, come down close to the top of my sun, bump it out here, and then down and around the whole entire document as we did before. Something kind of sort of like that. And it's going to automatically have the same gradient that we used just a moment ago attached to this. So you can see there's what we've got. And maybe we want to move it around a little. I'll maybe lift this up a little closer to the top and just adjust it until it looks, until it looks right. Maybe the gradient angle needs to be adjusted a couple degrees. Something like this, move it down. There, maybe like 84 degrees or so, so it's on a little bit more of an angle. Something like that. You don't have to get too picky. I'm probably already getting too picky because this tutorial is going to be, it's going to be a long one today. Now, one thing I am seeing is these rays of light, they do extend past the edge of our document here. So like if this ray, if I just duplicate it real quick, if this were full of green or something, it's it's leaking out past the edges of the document, which isn't really an issue now because we don't really see anything out there. I mean, maybe a really little bit of that ray right there, right? But we're going to be drawing the mountains, and those are going to go past the edge of the document. So let's take care of this problem now. Let's select our entire artwork layer, actually select it by clicking the little circle, and we are going to go Window and open up the Transparency panel, which I'll just click over here to the bottom of what we got going on here. I'll temporarily collapse color to bring it into the fray, and I am going to double click on this little box to create a layer mask, which is going to make all the artwork disappear because it filled the layer mask with black. No problem. We're going to grab the rectangular tool, click a single time, and create an 800 by 600 pixel rectangle. That's the size of our document. Hit OK. And we're going to align this here. I've got the Align panel open. Let's just align horizontal and vertical. You want to make sure you're aligning to the artboard, not to a selection. And now that we have this all aligned, it is full of the color green. We need it to be full of the color white. So up here in the color panel, we just choose white. And then down here in transparency, we come back to our editing mode. And there we go. We're back to our normal mode. But everything now that we draw on the artwork layer, see how the word artwork has the dashes underneath it? Everything that is built in this layer is going to be subjected to a layer mask that's being applied to the absolute top of the layer. So we now have that mask in place. I can select this green nonsense and delete it. That's obviously not part of our composition yet. So things are looking good. And the next thing that we want to do is draw these mountain shapes. We're going to do that using the pencil tool, I should say, not the pen tool, the pencil tool. You could use the pen tool. I just think the pencil tool is a really fast, easy way to draw sort of organic looking shapes like these mountains. And I'm going to begin with the mountains really close to the sun in here, all these little guys, because they're sort of in the back. I'm going to grab my Wacom tablet here. I'm going to make sure that it's turned on. And if I can find the button, there it is. And what we'll do is come over and double click on the pencil icon, and here are my settings for the pencil tool. So I'm going to keep I'm going to fill, the new pencil strokes. I'm not going to keep each shape selected because I want to be able to draw a shape and then immediately draw another shape. And I want to close the paths when they're pretty close together. So just if I get the pencil line sort of close to the end of the line, it'll just make it a closed, good shape. And then edit selected paths. We don't really need to worry about that too much, but right there at 6 is fine. Here's the important thing. If you want really, really smooth mountains, you can go really, really smooth with your pencil strokes. I want some jagginess in there. I don't want it to be like crazy jagged and super literal to what I'm drawing, but I want there to be just a little bit of smoothing, but mainly a lot of jaggedness because mountains are kind of craggy and rocky and kind of jaggedy looking. So that's what I want. I'm going to hit OK. And now I begin drawing. So I'm going to start with this mountain right here. And I just draw up and around just like that. I'm creating some overlap over the lines around it, and that's fine. Now, as you create these, you can have some fun, not really fun, but you can just sort of do something useful, I should say, and just make each shape of the mountain a slightly different color. That's going to be really helpful for us later on when we go and try to color all these in. We want them all kind of to be different colors so we can easily select them and know like, oh, there's that little hill, that one goes in the back, or this one stays up front, or whatever it may be. This is just going to make it really easy to go in and make any of those changes. So I'm going to quickly draw all these shapes, and I'm going to speed the video up for this part of it, and we'll be back in just a minute, and we'll make sure that we just have all of our mountains and rocks sort of layered correctly together. And there we have it, a series of kind of bizarre looking mountains, I'll admit. If we shut off the sketch, we're getting this kind of thing. Now, what we want to do is we want to make sure these are layered correctly. So, like there's some issues in here where the line isn't going to look quite correct. We want the edge of these hills to be sort of our water line. See how I drew them to be kind of craggy and jagged here along the edges? Oh, well, some parts kind of smooth, some parts jaggy. We want to fix that stuff. But like this little bluish purplish shape, it should be up above the green shape. So see how it's below the green shape? This is where I want you to familiarize yourself with the arrange hotkeys. Bring forward and send backward. Command or Control and the square bracket keys. It's going to be so helpful. You can select the shape and just go ahead and bring it forward. There we go. That's where that little mountain piece is supposed to sit. And maybe this blue mountain is supposed to sit on top of both of them. There, that looks even better. This little piece here, maybe this orange mountain should be sitting on top of all that stuff. Maybe bring it even further forward until it gets on top of the blue. something like that. That's probably a little bit better for that. This little guy here should probably be up in front of that little pinkish mountain back there. This green hill, that looks like it's right. Everything here looks okay. This orange mountain should probably be up in front of the other orange hill coming out of the back of it like that. And just make your adjustments like that until everything looks good. This is why I like doing all these kind of crazy colors, because it's very easy to see, okay, here are all the blocks and shapes that we're going to be working with in just a moment. One thing I do want to check here, I see a little wayward line down here. Let's go ahead and see what this belongs to. It belongs to this shape. So with the white arrow, the direct selection tool, we can just select that anchor point and just drag it up and just make sure it's tucked out of the way. It doesn't matter that's a little messy. We'll clean that up later, or worry about it later, I should say. Same thing here. We just have a little bit of the green hill. If we boost it up a little bit right there, it just comes together more nicely. So we'll make sure we do that. All right. Now that we've got all this, we're going to begin coloring this stuff. So with all these shapes, we don't want to accidentally select and color stuff in the back. So let's go ahead and just lock up the rectangle, which is our background color, lock up the sun, and these two paths, which are those two wispy wavy things we drew in the air, sort of the sun rays catching atmosphere or whatever. We can call them whatever we want. And let's begin with the colors closest to us. So we want to think for a second here about what's going on, right? We're looking into the sun. So the mountains and faces of the mountain that are facing us, the closer they get to us, probably the darker they're going to be. So we just, we don't want to make something super bright over here and then super dark as it gets closer to the sun. That wouldn't really make sense. It would make everything look kind of unbalanced. The other thing that we can do with this scene is we can sort of split it in half and say, okay, everything over here on this half, we can colorize all this stuff, and then we can take whatever the color is of our frontmost hill, we can make that the color of the frontmost hill shape on the other side. So let's just keep that in mind here as we build this out. So let's go ahead here with this color, and I'm going to, I'm trying to get over here to my swatches panel. Let's scroll down on the swatches panel, and I'm going to go ahead and select this darkest color we have here, and I'll select the shape opposite it, and I'll go, yep, give me the darkest color. I'm going to go with the second layer of hill here, and I'm going to go with my second darkest color, and I'll do the same thing here with this. Let's go second darkest, and maybe even this, we go second darkest with that. See what that looks like. That's not too bad. And then we'll go to our third layer, and once more, we'll probably go to our third darkest color. Same thing up here. We'll go third darkest color. And you can see there's some of the sun background shining through. So we can select this, and we can just grab anchor points. Well, if we actually select the anchor points, we can grab them and just drag them down just to make sure everything's covered up and nothing is sort of leaking through and messing up the illusion of our illustration here. There we go. That's kind of cool. All right, we can back out a little bit further. And now we will select maybe this middle mountain and maybe this guy up here. So I'll select these two, and I'll give it the fourth color. And this little mountainy thing tucked in here, it's probably going to be darker than everything around it. So we'll go and make that just dark because it's sort of being shrouded by the height of the hills around it. This hill here, we are going to go ahead and give that this nice pink color, and we'll give this little mountainy top sticking out up here kind of the same pink color. Now this shape and this shape here, we're going to give these both that same pink color, but I'm going to change the pink a little bit. So I'm going to double click color here, double click it again, and we're just going to make them a little bit lighter. Not too much lighter, just a little bit lighter. Something like that, just so they stick out. They're a little bit different. And look, we can see some green sticking through here. So we know we need to adjust something. Let's grab our direct selection tool. Let's select this little hill, and then we just grab a path. Whoop, we've got to make sure we actually click on the path, and then we can click and drag the path and make sure again that we're covered up and everything's looking good. Zoom back out a little bit. It's a little tricky here, working right in the midst of all these dialog boxes. And now we're going to begin doing some of the lighter colors in here. So actually, this little shape here will probably have more of this orangey. But these, as we get closer to the sun, they're going to start having some of these really light, really light colors. So let's go ahead and give 3 of them the sort of light, and then we're going to give 3 of them the one that's just a little bit lighter. So something like that. You can see there's just a little bit of variation in color for those mountains as they really get close to the sun. And then I'm going to make this little shape here a little bit darker than the stuff around it. And this one here, I'm also going to go with kind of a dark color, but I'm going to adjust this. I'm going to go to maybe RGB actually, and I'm just going to make it a little bit more red, maybe a little bit more blue as well. Get a little bit, maybe less blue, I'm sorry. I want to make it more orange. So I'm going to keep pushing and pulling this. Add a little more red, remove a little bit more blue, maybe make it a little pinky orange, as we get in tight. And maybe I'll go to HSB here and just reduce the overall saturation, because it doesn't quite look like it's fitting there with that much saturation. But just to throw in one little mountainy hill that just looks straight plain different. All right, so this is our mountain range, all colored, everything's good. This color here, maybe it should be a little darker. So again, if you need to adjust anything, HSB is so easy because you can just say, hey, look, brightness, go down, stop being quite as bright, and hey, be a little more saturated or a little less saturated or whatever. Make yourself a little bit more pink, something like that. And then boom, you just change the color and make something that just kind of sort of fits in a little more. And I think this little shape now should move up a little bit for us. Be up front. I'm just going to keep trying to move it up. There we go, until it's in front of that triangle. And I'm going to move it down a little bit so it sort of, I want this to be where the water, it looks like the water's flowing through and around that little hill, that bump, that giant boulder, whatever it ends up being in our finished piece of artwork. All right, so something like that I think is kind of cool. Now it's time to make the water. This is actually easier than you think it's going to be. We're going to simply create a rectangle. I'm going to zoom out one more so you can really see what's happening. I'm going to create a rectangle here that just covers kind of the whole watery area, right? And we're going to fill this with a gradient. So I want this to be a radial gradient, and we're going to make a new custom gradient. This is just this weird gradient. I'll say, look, just give me the black and white again, and we're going to make it radial. And here in the radial gradient editor, we're going to add a few new color stops. So I'm going to add a color stop around the 20% location. Actually, make it the 25% location right there. I'll add one around the 50% location and one around, if I can get it to stay, and one around the 75% location. They absolutely do not have to be exact. All right, select the darkest color handle and go with the darkest color at the end of the color palette. So like that, but I want to undo that, Command or Control Z. You want to just hit the little eyedropper tool and then go ahead and hit that color for the last color stop that we have. So we're going to go with the darkest bluish color, and then we're going to go for the second darkest color here, and then you just kind of work your way back. So select that middle slider, go with the third darkest color, select the fourth slider, go with the fourth darkest color, and of course for the fifth slider, we go with the fifth darkest color. Now what we need to do is move our gradient a little bit. Maybe I'll apply a little more orange, but mainly grab that center point, move it over more, like right underneath the sun where you would expect it to be, and let's just make the gradient a little bit bigger in general, because the dark, shadowy areas of our gradient, they really only have to be over here where they're going to be sort of hidden by the hills. So I'm going to move this down. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more so I can really get a handle on the gradient. It's gotten a little bit too big, so let's push it back in a little bit. And just, you're just going to try to be careful with it. Really, we could swing it this way so it's a little bit more true to where it really should be. I'll maybe pinch it in. You know what? I'm going to pull it out a little bit more. Something like that's kind of cool. Move it over there. Something like that's good, and it still looks really bad. It's hard to tell what we need to do or change as of right now. Like, I think there's a little too much orange, but let's just select this, and you can see here, this is our water. In fact, I can name this shape layer water. It's all the way at the top of everything we're doing. We just need to drag it beneath the mountains and let the mountains just exist, and you can see they're going to cut the water into place. So they're going to sort of act like a mask without ever having to mask anything, because we're just dragging the water beneath everything. So let's keep the water on top of the sun so we don't have to mask the sun. And there we go. We have our water in place. And like I thought, I'm going to grab the gradient tool. We have a little bit too much of this orange. Let's pull some pink. No, let's not pull some pink back into it. Let's move the center of our gradient back a little bit. And I think overall, just the whole gradient shape here needs to be a little bit smaller. We need to just kind of do that and maybe even rotate it a little bit if I can get the rotation. There we go, something like that. And let's just move it over and pinch this down. No, not pinch it down too much. And I don't know, just have fun with it. And I'm going to rotate it again here because I'm indecisive. Maybe I'll keep it kind of something a little bit like that. And I'll just push these colors. These are the actual colors in the gradient here that I'm able to push around. So I'm going to push these back a little bit. I really want to make sure I get some of that dark blue into my water surface here. So I'm going to push this back, something kind of like that. We'll open up the orange just a little bit more. Something sort of like that. I know I've said that now a few times, but I think that works pretty well. There we go. I think I'll live with that. And I could stay here and nitpick and play with this all day long. You know what? I need to adjust it again. This orange point really should be up there because we're really looking at the reflection of this on the water. There we have it. Something sort of like that. And one last thing. I'm just going to stretch it back out. Kind of, sort of like that. All right, that's our water. I'm going to live with that. I'm okay with that. But you can really see how the scene is beginning to come together here, and it's looking pretty nice. I want to add some kind of smoky fog in between each of the mountains. And there are a bunch of different ways we can do this, but there's kind of a cool way that's sort of fast and easy as well. Let's go ahead and grab all the mountains. So I'm going to lock up the water layer, right, because we don't want to select that. And everything now that's unlocked are just our mountains. So we can just select all the mountains and hit Command or Control G to group them together. We now have mountains in a group, right? So I'm going to just name this MNTS, and we've got mountains. We're going to duplicate this, Edit, Copy. And then we're going to choose Edit, Paste in Front. And for this Paste in Front option, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here so we can see what we're doing. I am going to apply a gradient. So the whole group is selected. I'm going to apply a gradient, radial gradient, and I'm going to say, look, just give me the original black and white. I'm going to select the black color stop down here in my gradient editor, and I'm just going to say make it white as well. So I'm just going to drag the white color down there and drag the black color stop away. And I'm going to select this white color stop and set the opacity to 0%. So now we've got this happening. Then I'm going to change the angle of the gradient to 90 degrees. So that pushes this white to the bottom. Then I'm going to select the other white handle, and I'm going to say, look, reduce the opacity to like 30%, something like that. And then take the center point to just push and contain the white at the base of all of our hills, just down closer to that white point. You can see what we're getting. We're getting this smoky effect that's exactly in the shape of all of our mountains. Now, the obvious problem is it looks really bad because it's on top of all those mountains instead of being tucked between them. So here's what we do. We select this entire group of shapes, and we go Object, Ungroup. So we get all this artwork here. And then we open up the mountains group. We're going to leave it as a group. And we need to begin dragging each of these shapes down just above the shape that it corresponds with. But look, because it's a white gradient, all we see is a white thumbnail because it's white artwork on a white gradient. Doesn't really help me. I don't know what's on the thumbnail. But here's what I do know. We duplicated this group. So whatever layer is on the bottom, it's going to be the same as whatever layer is on the bottom of my mountain group. So if I take this smoky path here and I just drag it all the way down, down, and I put it right on top of that path, it's going to be the one that matches up with this shape. So you can see I've got that shape there. And I've got the shape right on top of it that's the exact same one that just has the little smoky effect. So now I'm going to speed this video up and I'm going to drag all these down and just put them right on top of the path that it corresponds with. So you're going to have one shape and what looks like a blank thumbnail as you build this out. And all you're doing is dragging that white gradient and putting it right on top of that mountain shape. And there we have it. You can see we just have white thumbnail and then piece of mountain. And all of our mountains now look like they have these little glowing bits at the base of them. And you could, of course, select the ones in the front, right? Like I could go in there and say, look, this one in the front, the gradient is just way too strong. So I could select that gradient and say, look, instead of a 30% opacity, I want you to be like 10%, right? I could go over to the one right here and say, yeah, you too. You know what? I'm going to make you 20% there at the base. And you could go through and do that with all these shapes. You can just reduce the opacity and just do it until your composition, your scene, everything is coming together nicely and how you want it to come together. I'm not going to spend too much time because, like I said, we're going to spend enough time doing other stuff in this tutorial. But for now, we've got our glow in between all of our hills. Okay, let's make this a little more dynamic now. We're going to add some glow that's coming out of our sun, and then we're going to draw our little fisherman, and basically we're going to have this scene wrapped up. I'm going to lock up my mountains, and we are going to grab the ellipse tool. I might actually zoom out a little bit. I feel like I zoom in and out so much when I'm doing these tutorials. All right, let's drop this ellipse kind of right about there. That's sort of where the glow of the sun will be coming from. I'm going to give this just a standard orange, yellow type gradient. I'm going to make it radial. You know what? I'm actually going to make it a white to black gradient, so I only have two handles to edit here. Let's go with the radial version. I'm going to select the white color stop down here in the gradient editor, grab my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to say, give me that yellow, and then I'm going to grab the black, and I'm going to do the red. So this is the same color as our sky, the red of the sky and the yellow of the sky, but now for the glow of the sun. With the red handle selected, I'm going to set the opacity to 0%. This is going to give me a yellow that fades out to nothing, but as it fades to nothing, it's sort of becoming an orangey red color. Now I'm going to grab my my little selection tool, hold down Alt or Option, and just stretch the glow out sideways a little bit. Maybe make it a little bit bigger down the middle as well. Move it so it's right tucked in behind the hill, just kind of something like that. And now I'm going to set this to the blend mode in the transparency panel. I'm going to collapse color here. In the transparency panel, I'm going to set this to the screen blend mode, and it's going to do this kind of thing. Maybe we would just reduce the opacity a little bit. You can do whatever you want with it, really. The most important thing I think I'm going to do is this little mountain face here, it should be a shadow. So I think I'm going to copy that mountain face and maybe this one too right here, and just mask away the glow from those parts just to add a little bit more realism. So let's unlock the mountains, and I'm going to go to my direct selection tool. It's an easy way to select stuff that's in a group. I would need to lock up the ellipse though temporarily, and I can just select that shape and also hold down shift and select the shape across from it. Switch back to our regular selection tool and copy this. So go edit, copy, and then we're going to lock up the mountains again, unlock the ellipse, select the ellipse layer, and down here in the transparency panel, double click this little square to add a layer mask. We're going to say, look, unclip it. We want the glow to be there. And then we're going to go edit, paste in front. And the two shapes that we made are going to be pasted here in front. But we want these to be filled not with that weird white gradient. We want them to be filled with black. We want them to be a total solid black, just like that. And now we can select our little secondary thumbnail here to get back to our full editing mode. And now those hills are not going to be affected by the glow coming through there. They're masked out, but the glow is still hitting the water and reflecting around. And I'm going to leave some of the glow behind the hill here, even though it's not hitting the actual backside of the hill. I'm going to let it travel on the water a little bit, even though light doesn't really work that way. I just kind of like the way it looks. Okay, let's turn on our sketch once more, and let's get down here and draw our little Vietnamese fisherman. Just so cool. They throw these baskets or the net, the cage into the water and catch the fish. It's a really cool thing to watch. You can find it on YouTube. I'm going to grab let's go with the pen tool. We could use the pencil tool and just sketch it kind of rough. You know, maybe I'll do the pencil tool actually, and I'll just sketch it by hand. It might be kind of more fun to do. But you can do whatever you want when it comes to this. I am going to, before I start, change my fill. So for the fill, I'm just going to choose the solid color thumbnail down there. And I'll just go with like a black color for now. Maybe I'll go with red actually so we can see it on top of what we're doing. And I'm going to go ahead and draw this boat like that. Cut it back, down, across, and bring it right up. There we go. We have the boat. And it's just sort of essentially a thin plank. And we'll draw our guy standing on it. You know, maybe I should make this like the color green. That'll be a little easier to see, right? Now we're going to draw our guy. Again, I'm using the pencil. And you could, by the way, like I said, you could just use the pencil to you set it super smooth and make your guy really, really smooth. I'm going to go more jagged because I just think it's cooler. Go down, get this big flat brim hat. Get the face of him. Bring it down through his body. Get his leg, come up the other side of the leg, bottom of his little fishing coat, and there we go. We have our little fisherman. And now for the rest of this, I think we're going to use the pen tool. So I'm going to grab the pen tool, and I'm going to create his cage here. I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can go from the sort of middle of the boat here. Go from the middle of the boat and come right up to the top. Drag out the cage, hold down Alt or Option, and just suck that tangent handle back in. Draw the other side of the cage, something like that. Enter a return, because we want this not to be a filled shape, but we just want the stroke. So I'm going to swap out fill and stroke, and there we go. We have that. And now I'll probably draw also a like maybe one additional line for the cage right up the middle, something like that. Might be cool. And don't commit any sort of transform changes there. And then we'll just go through and starting with the path, I'll just loop around and draw these little loops. I'll probably speed up the video here as I just go through and create sort of the caging. You can do this with ellipses and use the Pathfinder and trim it in if you want, or whatever you're most comfortable with. I'm just quickly doing it by hand here, and it works for me. We could also go in and create the backside loop, but I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. What we want to do is get over here and work on his double fishing pole setup with all of this apparatus he has hanging off of it. I guess it's just fishing line, right? Sometimes the simplest answer is the one that's correct. Again, I'm just going to draw with just a stroke. And then I'll just trace kind of what I did here in my sketch. It does not have to be at all perfect. It just kind of, have some fun with it. And, let your hands go a little bit. And just draw whatever comes to you. Something like that. Let's go up here and make it loop around big time here. And I'll go ahead. Whoop, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and just suck this in. This actually might be a good use for the curvature pen tool as well, because you can just go through here really quickly, loop all this stuff up, And I'm going to just hook this around to a second fishing rod. I think that's how these fishing rods work. They look like they're sort of connected, or net grabbers, or whatever they are. I've never been a fisherman in Vietnam before. All right, so we have our shape. That's what I'm trying to say. We've got our shape now, and what I can do now is select all of this stuff, and we've got some fills and some strokes. We want it all to be fills, though. We want all of our fills to be, or all of our strokes to be fills. So we're going to go Object, Expand, and we're going to say, look, don't worry about the fills. We want you to expand every stroke to a fill. The reason I want to do that is because we're going to group this together now, Object, Group, and I'm going to fill it with my darkest color. So my darkest color is like one of these two colors. Maybe I'll go with that one right there. So there's our fisherman on the water. Let me shut off the sketch. But he's just way too big, and there's no shadow. We need to create a shadow and everything like that. So let's just grab him. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to hold down Shift here, scale him down, make him a bit smaller. Put him like over here, and he's floating, but yeah, he needs a reflection on the water. So we're going to create a reflection first with the pencil, and then we're going to create sort of a proper reflection. So I'm going to grab my pencil tool, and I'm just going to draw out a reflection here, sort of underneath his boat, just kind of something like that, a little bit longer than his boat, and just this sort of shape, looking like that. That's good. And I want to drag it beneath the boat group, right? There's our boat with our fisherman. Here's our new shadow. And we're just going to reduce the opacity of this to like, I don't know, 30%, something like so. And let's zoom out. And already that's doing a lot to make it look like the boat's actually floating. But let's take it a step further and duplicate the group. So we're going to go Edit, Copy, Edit, paste in, let's paste it in back actually here. And we're just going to grab the top handle and flip him right upside down. Maybe we'll make him a little bit longer than usual. We'll kind of move him up into place. Maybe we'll rotate him a little bit. We will try to make sure we go grab him, and we'll rotate him a little. There we go. And I'll just nudge it up just so it's kind of close to the boat, sort of something like that. And again, you can take as much time or as little time as you feel like you need to take for doing this stuff. Usually more time equals a better result, and I don't always take as much time as I should in these tutorials. There we go, something kind of like that's probably cool. I'm going to lock up the original group, the fisherman who's on the water. We don't want to mess him up. And what I'm going to do with the group that we have now, in fact, I'm going to lock up my path as well. Let's try using something like the wrinkle tool. You can double click on wrinkle and say, I don't want any vertical distortion. I just want horizontal, the side to side distortion. And let's go ahead and try to just distort. Whoa, that's a bit much. And we'll just distort this stuff so it looks like it's dispersing side by side on the surface of water. Let's maybe make the intensity 15 or something like that, and maybe also reduce the height to about half of what it is, something like that, and just click a couple times, right? And we'll just get our fisherman shadow looking like it's a bit dispersed. And of course, we need to reduce the opacity of this as well. So we'll knock this down to like 20%, just a little bit less than the initial shadow for the boat. And you can see we've got something kind of like that for the shadow. He looks a little bit like a skeleton, I'll admit, but just a little trick you can use there that allows you to create really complex stuff that would be on the surface of water like a shadow. And now, of course, last but not least, we want to just create some shadow to sort of bring the water to the edges of the mountains and make it just look a little bit more natural. So we're going to do this down here. I'm just going to lock up all these groups. We're going to do this here just above the water. Now, when we draw this artwork, it's going to appear at the top, but we'll just drop it down and we'll be fine. Let's keep our foreground color as that really dark color of the fisherman. Let's grab our pencil tool. Maybe we'll actually go with a little bit of a smoother pencil draw here. Let's see what this looks like. And what I'm going to begin doing is just drawing along the coastline. So like a shadow maybe coming out of here. I'm just going to just make it, I don't know, just loop right through, something like that. Loop it over and just draw this big, generous heap underneath the mountain. Looks really funky, but that's because it's on top of our mountains. Drag it down just on top of the water. And, of course, set the opacity to something like 20-ish%. There we go. There's our first sort of shadow. It looks a little toothy for my liking. But let's draw another one here. This one maybe we'll make it a little bit more flowing. But remember, it would sort of be the mountains that are casting shadows into the water. So we want it to be something that has some definition to it. Drag this down till it's right above the water, and also we'll go ahead and reduce the opacity of it down to about 20%. Let's deselect that and see what it looks like. So we're getting our shadows kind of built in. Maybe I'll add another shadow just up here. And of course, we'll select that guy, drag him down beneath, or just on top of the water, excuse me. Highlight him, reduce him to about 20% as well. And we'll have a little bit more of a shadow up there. Maybe also here, I'll just create another one that's coming out of the mountains right here. Again, drag it down, select it, reduce it to about 20% opacity, and be done with it. And then we'll come over here and do the same thing. So we'll just drag out, and I'm not getting the greatest shadows here, guys. We'll just create the shadow this way. Sometimes I get really good ones. And oftentimes I just have to tweak and keep adjusting it and coming back and playing with it more. And that's how a lot of this stuff is sometimes. See, that one's not too bad, right? And then we'll just come through here, overlay the shadow a little bit more. There we have it. Again, drag it down so it's just on top of the water. Select it. And I like to reduce the opacity down around 20, something like that. And now I'm going to do one that's much more just sort of general curvy in here, something like that. I'll do the same thing here. Drag him down. We've got him selected already. 20% opacity, you know the drill at this point. Maybe I'll do one that kind of smooths out the stuff on the other side too while we're at it. So we'll just come right out of here with a nice little shadow. Go right across the tip of that. Just come right through here like that. And bada boom. There we go. Something like that's kind of cool. Drag this down. We've got it selected. Let's go 20-ish% opacity. And there you go, something like that. So you can just spend as much time as you want building up those shadows. And by the way, we could select all these shadows here, right? We could select these by just shift-clicking all of them. By shift-clicking all of them. There we go. And I could perform one of those wrinkle tricks to this as well, and we can see what this looks like. I'm just going to group this up so I can quickly select it later. Let's try with the wrinkle brush. Maybe I'll double click. I'll make it a bit bigger. So let's set the height to about 200 and the width to about 300. Hit OK, so it's a bit bigger here. And then we can just go through and just kind of really mess with the edges of our shadows here, just to, again, make it look like they're interacting with organic water surfaces and not quite so fluid as we made them. So you can really do anything you want as you build out this effect. And just continue tweaking it and playing with it. Maybe move the boat guy around, tweak and adjust him a little bit, change up the colors in the sky. The sky might need to be a little bit darker, maybe a little bit more pink in this case. Could select that. Just select that red, right? Come up here to my color panel, double click to open that up a little bit bigger. Go to something like RGB and just say, look, give me a little more red. Give me a little bit more blue. Make the top of the sky a little bit more of like this rich pink color. Maybe that would look better in this instance or whatever. You can just have fun with it. You can play with it, go back and forth. But long story short, we have created this cool looking landscape here in Adobe Illustrator using some really rudimentary, fundamental tools, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Well, that's it for this one, folks. If you enjoyed this tutorial, two things. Make sure you subscribe and turn notifications on because I'd like you to get a little notification every now and then. And also, if you did make this, I would absolutely love to see it. Upload it to your Instagram and tag me in the Instagram post. My handle is @tutvid. And if you enjoyed this video, well, I've got another video on creating another vector scene in Adobe Illustrator. It's this pyramid desert scene. It's really cool. It's different, but it's still cool. And I think you'd really enjoy it. You can check it out by clicking the link on the screen right now. And just a reminder that I love all the people, but especially I love people just like you who watch the video all the way till the end. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Get it, got it, good. Nathaniel Dodson, tutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one.